You're listening to The Hikam with Shaykh Zahir Bacchus of the Lotri Foundation. In this podcast, Shaykh Zahir explains the aphorisms from Ibn Ata'illah's famous book of wisdoms, Al-Hikam Al-Ata'iyah, a classical manual of spiritual development. Visit seekershub.org for online courses, our reliable answer service, and engaging media.
والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما بفضلك وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. So we're in Hikmah number 93. Shaykh Ibn Ata'illah, this great scholar, he's talking, as we've talked about, he's talking about the servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and looking at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives to one, or what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forwards to one, or what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can withhold from one, and how you can conceive of the giving of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by His attributes, by what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives to you from His, and not shortchanging what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to teach you, or putting into perspective of what exactly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to give to you. And from His most blessed of names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Mu'ti wal-Ma'ni'. From the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who is the most giving, the one who gives. The one who gives without having or wanting anything in return, or a favor redone, or who gives Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without the servant having to ask. Al-Mu'ti, the one who gives without even the servant having to ask him. And the one who is Al-Ma'ni', the one who withholds. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala giving or withholding is in the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the hikmah and the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when He gives or He withholds, it is from His tremendous wisdom towards the servant and what He knows of the servant, or what He knows that will benefit or be detrimental to the servant. And these are from amongst the names or the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so Ibn Ata'illah, Shaykh Ibn Ata'illah, rahmatullah, he says, Meta ataka ashhadak birrahu, wa meta mana'aka ashhadaka kahrahu. He says that when He gives you, He shows you His kindness. When He gives to you, He shows you His birra, His kindness towards you. And when He denies you, وَمَتَ مَنَعَكَ, when He denies you, He's showing you His qahr, His irresistible power. When He prevents you, when He denies you, what is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showing you? He's showing you His power. He's showing you His power. And by way of showing you His power, He's telling you that your power is limited. When you want something, or you're asking for something, you're seeking something, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala withholds it from you, what is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showing you? That your power is limited. And He's showing you His irresistible or His ultimate power. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing you, His ultimate power. فَهُوَ فِي كُلِّ ذَلِكَ مُتَعَرِّفٌ عَلَيْكَ وَمُقْبِلُ وُجُودَ لُطْفِهِ عَلَيْكَ. And so he says, so in both his disclosing, in both his disclosing himself to you, his knowledge that he discloses to you, and his drawing near to you, with his lutf, with his gentleness or loving kindness, both of them. So in both his giving and his withholding, in both of them, in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala giving you or withholding from you, He's showing you what? He's showing you His, first He's making Himself aware, He's disclosing Himself to you. And secondly, He's drawing close to you with His lutf, with His loving kindness. And He's drawing closer to you. وَقُبِلَ بِوُجُودِ لُطْفِهِ عَلَيْكَ. And He is drawing closer to you by His or with His loving kindness to you. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so the servant, if he pays attention to the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then he will see that both the giving that both giving and withholding, that there is tremendous hikmah in it. There's tremendous hikmah. And the hikmah in it may dawn on you, it may come to you, it may not come to you. It may not, or it may or may not come to you. So when the servant is withheld from, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prevents the servant from attaining something, or prevents the servant from acquiring something, or prevents the servant from entering something, or going through something, or establishing something. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prevents it, then the servant has to believe that it's towards his benefit. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has done so in order to benefit the person. And the person, if he believes that, and he believes in the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he believes that Allah has wisdom, then he has to feel, and he should feel, or she should feel, they should be pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in charge of their affairs. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in charge of their affairs. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to prevent something, He will. And there's nothing that the servant can do. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to give something, then that thing will come to you. It will come to you. As the Prophet ﷺ says, that if something is meant for one, there's no one that can withhold it from you. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala meant something or is going to give you something, there's no one that will prevent it from you. And whoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to withhold from, there's no one that will give it to you. No one. No one. No one is going to give it to you. No one. And it comes in the ayah too. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. That it is going, whatever is good for you, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give it or withhold it. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will withhold it. So the servant, what does the servant know? The servant has to believe that in both of them, Shaykh ibn Ata'illah, he says at the end, he says he has to believe that in both of them, it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who is making Himself known to the servant. How is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala making Himself known? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making Himself known to you by either withholding, so that you know that it's Allah whose power is ultimate, or Allah giving, so you know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is kind to you. So the servant, when he's given to by Allah, he seeks and he thanks Allah. He's thankful that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is kind to him, gentle to him. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala withholds from one, then the servant has sabr and understands Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ultimate power is upon him. That it's Allah it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ultimate power who is upon the servant. So the servant with his Lord, he's what? He's either shakiran or he's sabiran. The servant with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's either going to be thankful or he's going to be patient. He's going to be thankful because Allah has given to him, or he's going to be patient because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala withheld from him, or giving him something he does not want. And so this is the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give or he withhold for the servant to come to the realization of his attributes, of his names. The names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what they are. The names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are attributes. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the best of attributes. The best. The very best of attributes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has. And so that servant has to fully be cognizant of what is happening and be guided by it. Be guided and fully understand it. Fully understand. So that one is always pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places one in goodness or places one with pleasure, then you're thankful and you're happy with your Lord, you're pleased. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places one in hardship, withholds from one, then one is also pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because you know that Allah, pleased with what? That it's Allah who's in charge of your affairs. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who's in charge of your affairs. And you have pleasure in the qada of Allah. You have pleasure that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who's in charge of your affairs. No one else. If you're pleased with the fact that Allah is the one who placed this burden on you or this difficulty, then you can seek what? You can seek a way out with Allah first and foremost, before seeking a way out with anyone else. That's where being pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's the outcome. If you're pleased with Allah in goodness or in difficulty, in ease or difficulty, then the person in difficulty will seek a way out with Allah first and foremost, not with anyone else. He will seek a way out with his Lord first and foremost. And this is the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the loving kindness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the way. And so this is what the servant has to gain. Servant has to gain through his salah, through his ibadat, through the works that he does. The servant has to gain the trust and the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and understand the attributes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants him to be realized in. Because sometimes the servant, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings to the servant certain things to the servant because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to realize one of his attributes or two of his attributes or his attributes. And so when that happens, it's because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to understand something of himself. And so he says he wants to disclose to you something. Or he wants to bring you close because of his lutf upon you, because of his loving kindness upon you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from amongst those who understand and who has realization of this. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us and guide us and forgive us, have mercy upon us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase us in closeness to Him, forgive us and protect us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the best of this world, best of thereafter. Forgive our elders, our parents, give them good health and long life. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect the believers. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala secure them. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala feed them and clothe and protect them against those who seek to oppress them. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala close, feed, and forgive and protect all of our brothers and our sisters, protect our children, keep them on the straight path. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect our elders, our parents, give them good health and long life. Those who are sick, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala heal them and cure them, provide for them, nurse them back to good health. Those who have passed away, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant him his mercy, his maghfirah, and his shade on that day when there's no shade except his shade. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make our homes amongst the homes of the believers, make our last words our very best words. Subhanaka hamdik shadu an la ilaha illa ant astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.
Thank you for listening to The Hikam with Shaykh Zahir Bacchus. Help Seekers Hub spread the light of guidance to millions around the world by supporting us through monthly donations by going to seekershub.org/donate. Your donations are tax deductible in the US and Canada.